Trustee Smith.
Here.
Trustee Weaver.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I guess Trustee DeLay has had surgery on his shoulder.
Got a new shoulder put in. It's
So
progressing well, but I'm told that's extremely painful.
let's begin. Under tab 1 is the February 27th minutes. And Alan, thank you very much for putting the book together for my section. And the minutes and the materials have been out there for a while, so I would entertain a motion for the minutes.
I'll move that with a comment,
Okay?
not a correction. But the fifth item where it talks about out-of-state students, tuition, et cetera, I think the minutes are accurate. I just want to make sure that we have on our next agenda a follow-up on, we got a description of what's happening. I want to know what the recommendation is on how to go forward.
Is the your R250 in particular?
Well, yes, as I understand it, if you're within 200 miles, you
Yes.
get this, and we've talked about
Yeah.
expanding it to 50 states or the states that touch us or whatever, and there has to be a little research done, or a lot, on whether it's positive or negative. Do we have, how many students can we take, and then what's the student cost?
And Mr. Chairman, we are, Al and I actually spoke about this just before this meeting had started, and it's our intent to bring a
The
recommendation.
minutes are accurate, I just want to make sure
You'll follow up
that
on it.
it's not the end of it.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Heidi, make sure you remind me before the next meeting that I remind them that they had something due to us. Okay? And if they don't get it to us, I'll sick Lindsay on them. Okay. Now, Alan, tab 2.
I need a vote on the minutes.
Oh, in the minutes, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right.
We have.
Any more
Miss-
I need a
motion,
second?
And we need a second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion about the minutes or corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, tab 2. Alan.
Yes, this one is approval of policies. These are related to the severance approvals that you have done in previous meetings for procurement and capital management, and it's severance from TBR. So we will be taking those responsibilities on at the campus level July 1. So we held these policies back from last June. If you recall, we gave you a lot of policies to approve back then. We held these back knowing that we really didn't need to put these in place until we had our severance approved, which was approved at the THEC May meeting. So they have approved both of our severance for procurement and capital management. So this section has 5 policies in it, 2 policies that we're recommending the board will have ownership and approve. There's 3 policies that will be designated to be approved by the president. So our recommendation is approval of the 2 policies related to capital management. One of them is campus master plans, and the other is acquisition and disposal of real property. And both of those align with current State Building Commission policies that are already in place. We just had to mirror our local policies.
In your book, I think that's page 17, 18, 19, and 20. Is that right, Alan?
Yeah, on page 15, you'll see the 2 policies that we're recommending approval of this committee, the campus facility master plan and disposal acquisition of real property, and a brief description of each one. It basically says the campus master plans will be developed and using a consultant at the campus level, brought to the board for approval before we submit it to THEC and then the State Building Commission. Same thing with acquisition and disposal of real property. Anything outside of the master plan will have to come back to the committee for approval.
I think we had discussion at the last meeting on this topic and had discussions on this previously. So is there any more discussion about these two policies that we have before us that the board needs, that this committee needs to approve for the board?
And Mr. Chairman, the three additional committees that the policies that the committee recommends be delegated to the president's approval.
Okay, yes, yes. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to do the two approvals and the approval of the other three policies to the president.
So moved.
Got a motion, second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Good. Alan?
Tab 3 relates to our capital outlay project submittal for 2019-20, and I'm going to let Bill Waits from Campus Planning walk you through that. You've heard a lot of this before, so a little bit repetitive, but he can walk you through what we know at this point.
And let the record show that Bill was prompt at getting to the podium.
Thank you, Alan, and good morning. I would request you guys go to tab 3 in your binder. This item is a request for approval of the School of Concrete and Construction Management facility for the 2019-2020 capital outlay budget request to the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. In our previous meetings, we had discussed the unique character of the School of Concrete and Construction Management facility. Some of the degrees offered are very unique nationwide, especially the Concrete Industry Management Bachelor of Science, and as well as the Concrete Industry Management MBA, which is the only degree of its kind in the nation. I would, however, like to point out on page 27, I have a 20% retention. It is actually an 80% retention. That was a typo, and I apologize to the SCCM program for misrepresenting their retention rate, so 80% in the industry. The current facility housing the SCCM program are in Voorhees Engineering Building and the Midget Building. The campus master plan has identified both of these structures as deficient in existing program suitability and as well as physical building condition. The proposed new facility for the School of Concrete and Construction Management is approximately 54,000 square feet in size and will primarily composed of laboratories, in addition to general classroom spaces, faculty and staff offices for the CCM department. In addition to those, we'll have conference areas and advisor rooms. There are two support projects that will be needed to complete this new facility. One, to clear the land for this new building, Abernathy and Ezell Halls, will require hazardous material abatement as well as demolition. It's important to note that both of these projects are listed as high priority items in the 2016 Campus Master Plan. Also in support of this project is, and future growth in the east quad of the campus, is the Satellite Chiller Plant Addition project. This consists of a 3,700 square feet building addition to our satellite chiller plant, a new 1,500-ton chiller, cooling tower, and associated pumps, new steam and chilled water lines to the east quad, new natural gas, domestic water, and sanitary sewer utilities. It's important to note that this not only will support our new CCM building, but future buildings to come in this area. So this is actually a very good campus amenity that's folded into this project. The proposed site, and if you look on page 29, is located in the east quad of the campus. It's identified as number 1 on the lower image there on page 29. This location will group the proposed SCCM building along with a future math and computer science building and a future applied engineering building to create an academic neighborhood focused on STEM and STEM disciplines. The proposed cost and the materials is identified as $40.1 million. I would like you to know in the meantime, are looking at ways to cut the square footage as we go in more detail with the programming of the building. So right now, we're currently at 52,450 square feet. So we've shaved a little bit of square footage off the building, and maybe in hopes of potentially reducing that slightly, the cost of that slightly, but that's where it stands right now. If we do the 15% match on the capital budget submittal, that would equate to $34.9 million in state funding and a $5.2 million match in university funds. At this time, I would like to open the floor for any questions that you may have regarding the outlay request or the project.
Bill, what is the approximate timeline of the project in entirety?
It will be, we're still kind of finalizing the schedule, but it would take approximately 3 years after we get when we learn about the budget. If we get the money, by the time to do the demolitions, the design work, and the construction, assuming a 1.5 year construction time.
So is that 3 years from next September?
It will be November, from next
November.
November, thereabouts. And we may be able to compress that a little bit, but we do have a lot of, given the utilities going in, some of that will run concurrently, but we do have some demolitions and things like that that will require a little bit of the process before we start.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may make just a few remarks on this recommendation. As you've heard, this program is a signature program. It is one of the programs that have really brought national recognition to our university. We have had throughout the years consistent and significant support from the industry. In fact, just a month ago, the National Advisory Board met on our campus and indicated their continued support, both financially and otherwise, for this particular program. Dr. Heather Brown and her colleagues and the industry have been raising successfully funds to meet the match. I've met with several of the representatives, and they have demonstrated that the funds, the resources will be there. There was a great excitement with the possibility of this being the #1 priority this year from this board, from that group. And so it comes highly recommended by the administration to this committee and to our board.
And to add to that, the match now required by THEC on any new building coming forward has to be at least 40% privately funded. That's a new requirement now. And this project here, there would be no question whether they can, get to that. Now you can go over the 40, but it has to be a minimum of 40 that is privately raised.
And there are private funds available, is that correct?
Yes.
That have already been gathered?
Oh, yes,
Yes.
I remember there's a pretty good chunk of
Significant.
money already donated,
yes.
right?
So what is the match on this project?
$5.2 million.
Okay.
So the total project cost is $40.1 million. So you back off the 5.2. So the state request right now would be $34.9 million.
Realizing trustee DeLay's not here, has trustee DeLay been asked to give input into his opinion since that is his career path?
He certainly has. I
Okay.
personally have had several conversations with Trustee DeLay, and I will tell you, he is excited as one can be
Right.
about this recommendation. I think, Mr. Chairman, you've had as well.
I'd be sure to continue to utilize his expertise.
I have one question about the program advisor rooms. Are these college advisor rooms?
It's my understanding that they are, and I think they will also serve to help career placement and things like that going forward.
And the only reason I'm asking is there is for the college, the advising center is in the Davis Science Building. So I'm wondering if you're looking for a place to cut some space, and I know 3 rooms isn't a whole heck of a lot on a building that size, but we have an advisor center for the whole college, and all the departments are in that college advising center. That's the only thing. I'm not going to get into the architecture, but I'm just going to point out that we have an advising center for the college that we may not need advising space necessarily.
And I think that's something the committee is
Right,
still working, you're still working with the department.
Absolutely.
that
We're still
can
finalizing
have
with
those
Dr.
discussions.
Brown,
Right.
trying to, obviously, we want to have enough space for future growth. We mentioned the robustness of the program. We want to make sure we're thinking decades ahead and not just current needs. So I think that's part of it. But obviously, we need to be good stewards of the university money
Right.
and resources as well. So
Right.
it's kind of a balancing act to balance all those, both of those items.
Trustee Adams, yeah.
Yeah, question regarding the demolition of the Abernathy E-Cell buildings. Begs the question of, well, I assume there maybe is a university policy, but are these names smitten from the record, so to speak, or what happens?
Well, we have precedent of that, of course. We had to take down the Gore building for the
Yeah.
science building.
Right,
And at this point, the policy is, once the building is down,
right.
there's no attempt to rename.
In the science building, what names were there?
We're waiting for some significant multi-million-dollar gifts to name that, and that's out there for the science building. Now, we have the atrium that's
No,
named.
but you took some buildings down.
Yes.
Yes,
And those names were what?
Gore was
Gore.
one of, Gore Hall, and what were the other,
the Clement?
Go-
Clement?
Clement.
Was that Clement?
Really?
And we also, by the way, we alert the families
Yeah.
that it is coming down, and we have not had any pushback, any feedback.
And if they want to, they can contribute.
They
to another
can,
building.
certainly can.
Correct.
In the original contracts, there's no conflict at all?
No.
No.
No, ma'am.
In any future contract
No.
that?
We want to make sure that there is, good questions.
Any
None
more?
of these were a result of a financial contribution.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, I mean, I say that without knowing, but Clement and Gore didn't give any money
That's
for
correct.
that.
That's correct.
It's an honorary,
To grant
But the
That's
two we're
naming.
talking about now were, I assume, financial.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's been a change across the country in universities. 20, 30 years ago, as the chairman said, buildings were named honorary and memorial. And of course, as universities are now required and necessitate raising funds to augment the budget, we all have moved across the country as to encouraging naming. And this building is a good example of that. So if you have any possibilities, any suggestions for the naming of the science building or the construction building, I'm sure Joe and his staff would be happy to entertain. We actually have a list of guidelines for buildings, rooms, et cetera, so that there's some consistency and we don't give things away, essentially.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, we need a voice approval on this?
Yes.
I need a motion to approve this project.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, Bill. Okay, tab 4 relates to capital maintenance projects, and I'm going to use my second lifeline and give it over to Joe Whitefield.
Good morning, good to be with you. In your tabs, you have our priority projects that are being submitted or being presented as our capital maintenance request for fiscal year 2019 and 2020. We've included a couple of things to give you some context for these projects. First, you'll notice the THEC maintenance pools and allocation. That's intended to show you really the change that we've been experiencing the last couple of years, where we're going to what I would consider sort of a block funding approach. And as you see, MTSU are using the statewide formula for higher education. Our percentage is about 6.8% of the total maintenance allocation. And as THEC has proposed $120 million statewide for higher ed, that translates to $8.12 million for us. So with that instruction, we design the projects to fit that number in accordance with the THEC instructions. And also at the bottom of that page, I've included a little bit of the history. There you can see the previous 5 or 6 years, so you can kind of see how beginning in 14-15, that was a single project at $1.3 million. And so you can see in the recent years how the funding has increased, which we find very important and very favorable for us right now. So with that, we have the requested projects. The first 5 projects, again, are for 2019 and 2020, and we have been asked to present. I'm sorry.
Page number 36.
Okay. Sorry, thank you. Page number 36, we have our projects. The first 5 are for this fiscal year that we're discussing, 2019 and 2020, and the individual projects requests have been provided for you. And the next 4 is a mirror, or at least a window into the future as we prepared for out years worth of potential projects. And so those have been prepared to try to just timeline some things. Those certainly can change as priorities and events and maintenance needs change over time. But today we are focusing on just the primary 2019 and 2020. Any questions about those, that background information? Okay. Sorry, I don't have the page numbers. If I go to the first page of the first project, be happy to talk about details of the individual projects. But the first project we have listed is a roof replacement for 3 buildings. That would be our central plant, our cogeneration plant, chiller plant, and our Weiser Patent Science Building. And so that project is for $600,000, and I have the project cost broken out, and we've included with this, again, the project details. One of the things that you may notice as you look at the project details is we've included our survey scores, because every building is reviewed and surveyed, and the assets of the building, the systems in the building have physical inventory scores, and so we include those so that you can see, again, the need for the maintenance projects. So again, our first project is the roofing project for 3 buildings.
Is a skylight necessary in the Weiser patent? The reason I say that everyone leaks.
Every
skylight leaks.
Every skylight leaks.
That's in that atrium, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah. I think it adds that, yeah, I think that's pretty important.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah.
Any that we could replace would be good, because they're all a maintenance problem. Go ahead.
I would agree. So, again, you see the details there for $600,000 for that project. Yes, sir.
What is the commercial warranty on a roof nowadays?
20 years.
20 years,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
all right.
Matter of fact, typically we can't request a roof replacement until we hit the 20 years on the life of the building. So that's typically the schedule. And again, part of our looking out in the future is that we try to plan for those. Second project is actually a very significant one. Is KOM.
Starts on page 45.
Thank you. Kirksey Old Main, as I think most of you know, is an older, very prominent building, and it's considerably older, over 100 years. And so historically, at the funding levels we've received, we typically can only do like a system at a time. But at this point, we're trying to really move the needle for the maintainability of that building. And so we're looking at $4.7 million for that, and that will include installing a fire alarm system and sprinklers for the building. Well, it has fire alarm system. We'll install the sprinklers for the building and get it sprinkled, as well as getting into the spaces and updating the HVAC mechanical out in the spaces. Will certainly require getting to some ceilings and some lighting. So typically those types of projects are obviously very expensive and very costly, but now given the current funding climate, we intend to sort of tackle that this year to improve that.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, that amount is just a drop in the bucket for that building. That building is in bad repair. In fact, a couple of semesters ago, I got an email from a student, and I toured the facility, the restroom, and it was just absolutely horrible.
Correct.
And it's a classic example of the state really neglecting to keep up with its facilities and resources. And it is an historic building. 1911 is one of the first 4 buildings built when the university was established, but it is in really bad shape. So glad to see that we are doing something, but most of that is behind the scene. Where students and visitors come in and interact with that facility, I'd hope that we could begin to address some of those issues as well.
Yes, sir. For those reasons, we're pleased to at least be able to make these improvements behind the scenes, because there's a saying in maintenance that the romance of maintenance is there is none. Okay, so to the degree that we can improve these buildings and improve the reliability and functionality of the buildings, that's an important that we can do that. But much agree with President McPhee. There's more to be done there. Certainly, if there's questions about a particular project, you can ask. Third project we have is HVAC and mechanical improvements for the Stark Ag Building.
Let me stop you just for a second.
Yes, sir.
Little housekeeping. Are the mics on?
You know, I was wondering about that.
Yes.
They're working on that.
What?
They're going out to the street.
Not for application in here. They can't hear on the side. So, so why don't you move over to that podium
So that I can see you.
so you can address, your voice will carry that way.
Okay.
That's
And let's not use this podium.
okay. That's good.
And turn up the volume.
Right.
Is that better?
Yeah.
That's all I can do. Sometimes they don't follow instructions very well. But
I was wondering that. But the mic-
we'll pick up number 3. I don't think that, yeah, the lights are working.
We'll try to address
53, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, with page 53, we have our third project, which is mechanical and HVAC upgrades for Stark Ag and Police Station. Again, long overdue, needed improvements there for $1,965,000. One of the things that always occurs when you finally get into these buildings and do a significant upgrade, you will have to bring up sprinkler systems and address a lot of code issues that heretofore are grandfathered in. So you'll see some of these projects are reflective of that need as well. Project 4, do you know the page on that? 59, page 59, Project 4 is for $450,000, and that is our campus stormwater best management practices, Phase 1. We are co-permitted with the city as a MS4 on our stormwater permit, and that requires us to do a number of things in managing the stormwater on campus. And of course, today with the rain, you can imagine there are certain days you think about stormwater more than you do other days, but today's one of them. So this is to allow us to deal with some grading and some stormwater issues on campus to try to help us with certain practices there to manage the conditions. With the growth of campus, the site issues on campus, and things like that, over time, certain things just, you need to back up and just address things a little bit more holistically. So this is what we anticipate is one of a few phases like this in the years to come to get us some improvements to our stormwater management. And project number 5, page 61, is to replace and install 2 boilers in this facility. And just given the age and the maintenance condition, we'd like to get ahead of that and go ahead and replace these boilers. So those are the projects as presented with some supporting information and a little background information. I'll entertain any questions or comments you might have.
How do you decide to replace boilers here versus new restrooms and Old Main? I mean, who picks winners and losers on that?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of the difference for us in maintenance is we look at the systems. Like when it comes to replacing restrooms, we would look at plumbing, for instance, the plumbing of that. When you talk about something that may be more of a renovation, like if you get into a space and you really were to renovate the space, expand it and add new stalls or things like that. Once it becomes more of a renovation, it becomes more of a campus planning and facilities project that could become more of an outlay or renovation project. We tend to focus more on the MP&E, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, and the building systems as much as possible. Now, to that end, I will say, and we have done with Dr. McPhee's assistance, if capital maintenance can take care of the largest issues that we have on campus, which of course that's what they're intended to do, that allows us to take perhaps some local money and do some onesie, twosie, some smaller projects to take care of some of those types of most relevant micro issues. But if we can address more of the macro issues, the capital maintenance, we're freed up to use some local money to help on an as-needed basis in those areas.
Do we have a list of 50 and, I mean, you pretty well know what the number is going to be. And I'm sure there's not enough money to do it, but I just wondered, do you make that decision?
Well, we consult, and then we have a lot of data, a lot of macro data and micro data about, you're talking about prioritizing the projects?
Yeah.
Yes. We have a lot of information, and of course, we use our maintenance histories, and we bring a lot of things into play to create the priority list, to which we present to Mr. Thomas and Dr. McPhee and our administration to get additional input. But yes, sir, we try to do it based on our firsthand knowledge, if you will.
There's a backlog to that question of maintenance, both for our university and also for the system across the state. And until recently with Governor Haslam, we actually were getting zero, not just MTSU, but higher education in general. And Alan, and that number was enormous for the system and also for the university, but we've begun to make some headway that addresses those priorities list.
Right. One thing I will point out, because I think this is something that we've done here that I think is fairly unique and fairly important. In our master plan, one of the ways we've worked with campus planning and academics and others in the past is that we look at the physical condition of buildings. And so we have a rating system where we rate buildings overall and systems overall. But we have combined that with the program suitability. And so we're looking at the academic programs. And so we actually have a nice table and bubble chart that shows where we juxtapose the physical condition of the building and a rating against the academic programmatic suitability. And so that you can see where you can get the most bang for the buck. I mean, we can fix the worst space, but it might have the least impact in terms of use and those students. So we're trying to marry those things to have a more robust approach to our maintenance.
Joe,
Yes,
Joe, how many on-site, on-hand maintenance personnel do we employ?
In facility services, which includes environmental health and safety and construction administration, we have about 115 employees. But let me give it, to put it in perspective, we also have some additional contracts with vendors to supply services. So for instance, we have a custodial contract that has about 88 or 90 cleaners associated with it. So just to show what we have on campus, that's just one example. We have about almost 100 folks associated with the custodial contract that does some cleaning in a lot of our facilities. So,
I mean, clogged toilets or whatever. I mean,
we're probably in the building services area. I'd have to. I think we probably have about 16 to 17 folks.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Go get it done.
Yes, sir. And we do employ some additional contractor support for things that can be planned and scheduled. And yes, sir.
I guess, any more discussion? Hearing none, we need a motion to approve the maintenance projects.
So move.
Second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Okay.
You got that right.
All right. You know, I've been drinking caffeine. They've been drinking water. All right, y'all pick it up. Okay, next tab. Tuition fees and housing.
Yes, tab 5. And my lifeline for this one is sitting behind me, so if I look back, that I'll be looking at Kathy Thurman to get me through this one. So tuition fees and housing rates. First is, I'll go over the tuition, and I'm not going to go through every section. Like I said, the materials have been out there for a while. I'll answer any questions on any page, but let me hit the highlight pages
What page you
first.
starting on?
I'm going to start on page 73.
Thank you.
So on page 73 starts with how we look at what revenue sources we have coming in for the year. Down in that middle section through the funding formula, it looks at how much we're getting for the salary piece from the state, as well as any other additional allocation we may be getting from the state. We usually have a reallocation of existing funds there. This time that is mostly related to a reduction in the TBR chargeback. So that's always there. And the top part shows what we have in fixed cost that we know is coming up for the next year. Of course, the first thing we always put up there is the mandated state salary increase. This year, 2.5% salary pool. So that is at a cost of $4.1 million. If you look in the middle section down there, you'll notice that funding for that was only $2.6 million. So shy by $1.5 million. Second line, we put in a salary market adjustments, which you'll hear a little bit more about in a later section, but $2 million for that, which includes benefits. So I believe about $1.6 million of that will go toward actual increases, with the other $400,000 going toward benefits. But that is to implement just a portion of our current market study, which, if you recall, is based on 2014-2015 figures at this point. The other items, faculty promotions, increases in scholarships and discounts, health insurance, and then we have other fixed costs and some student success initiatives that we implement on a year-to-year basis. Other fixed costs can relate to utility increases, increases in operation, just the ongoing operation and maintenance of plant, and then software, increases in software maintenance agreements. And then we have a schedule of new academic programs that come on every year as well. When we do a new academic program, there's usually a 3 to 5 year kind of implementation plan. So you're bringing those staff and additional cost on, each year through the phase. So in summary here, the budget needs $9.9 million. We are receiving $5.5 million from the state or through reallocated funds. So the unmet need is $4.4 million. So that equates to a maintenance fee, in-state maintenance fee increase of 2.84%. If you'll recall, at THEC's May meeting, they did reaffirm or confirm the 0 to 3% increase range that they had given us as guidance back in November. There was much discussion for that through THEC's commission members at the May meeting. A lot of discussion, active discussion. So they went from no range to doing a 0 to 2.5% range to even lower than that. So I mean, but they finally did go with a 0 to 3% range. Now what will happen in July, we will need to go back to the THEC meeting in July and explain how we came up with what we are proposing here, the 2.84%, and how we arrived at that. So,
And I'd like to add, I had a conversation with Director Mike Krause yesterday regarding this and some other issues, and also I had some conversations last couple of days with the other LGI presidents, and there's some concern here as to THEC's with the new Focus Act authority that is given THEC the responsibility of actually mandating particular within the range, but they're moving even with further than that in saying what, not only a range, but there was a great discussion about universities preventing us from going up at all, as Alan said, to 0%. We all are concerned about that, and we have to go back and justify in July the recommendation from the board. We don't have a problem with that. Obviously, there's the issue of the mandated salary increases and just the operational piece. But I think down the road, I've been told by Director Krause and his staff that TEC will be taking more of a hands-on approach with regards to tuition and fees.
Let me say this, there's going to be a struggle there. Because they didn't appoint us. If we don't set the fees, then there's no reason to come up here this morning.
Exactly.
So I'm not sure TEC is going to be as boisterous as perhaps suggested. Because, I mean, that's kind of what we do. Anyway, good.
As a general question, are the health insurance costs funded by the state every year, or does it change with budgets? You know,
No, they fund
They
that
always
each year,
fund it?
yes.
Okay.
And
I didn't remember how that worked.
And the health insurance, it goes on a calendar year basis. The increases go up in January, so it's usually you'll see a half funding, and then the next year they have to put in the other half, and it gets a little, but it's always funded.
So that part's regular.
Right.
Gotcha.
From a market standpoint, do you have any sense of what other state universities will do or are doing in terms of increases and recommended percentages?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
And in fact, I'll have Alan speak to that.
Right. The other LGIs, I'll exclude University of Memphis at the moment, are going to be somewhere between 2.7, 2.9%, you know, just up and down a little bit. University.
Compared to the 1.5 deficit, or?
Well, they're staying within the 0 to 3%, but they will be, their increase, where ours is 2.84, they're going to be somewhere between 2.7 and 2.9 when they request their fee increase.
So we're in line with
Right, yeah. Now, University of Memphis is on the record of doing a 0% increase.
And let me comment on that.
Yeah.
Having sat around the table
I was going to.
as an administrator at University of Memphis for 5 years, we always have to look at the history, and also 3 years at the Board of Regents. For about 7 or 8 years during tuition and fees discussion and approval by the TBR, the University of Memphis, they've always given the University of Memphis permission and approval to go up 2 or 3% higher than all the other universities in the state. And the other presidents in the system, all 5 of us, always made an issue of that, but their rationale was that, well, the University of Memphis is a major research university and it costs more to operate. So if you look at on page 74, the difference in the total tuition and fees between all the LGIs, and you see between MTSU and the University of Memphis, it's almost close to $1,000, $900 plus. Is that, my math is right there? Yeah, $894 to $9,701 tuition fees. They have had the luxury of going up significantly for years, and we're just catching up. So I hope when THEC looks at this, because I understand they were saying, well, if University of Memphis could go 0, why the rest of you can't? Well, they need to know some history that the University of Memphis has been going up significantly higher for years than the other universities.
Well, we don't want to be penalized because we've been frugal.
That's right.
I mean, the heck of it is that they went ahead and got it.
That's
$1,000 on 9,000 is a
Right.
big number.
Yeah.
So we could go up 2.5%, you do the math, the next 4 years, and not be equal to what they are now. So anyway, there's a fine line for being frugal and not taking
and
advantage.
efficient. That's
Right.
right.
So So just out of curiosity, what are the implications of not staying within THEC's guidance?
We're in there, guys.
No, I know we are.
We have-
I mean, if we were to go above.
I'm just asking, just for information. So I know that none of the institutions have done this, but let's say we said we want to make an increase of 3.1%. What would be the implication?
That really is a good question, because even in this discussion, the Focus Act just says that TX should, the previous legislation allowed for a recommendation of a range.
Right,
The
right.
new legislation says that you shouldn't go above that range.
Right.
But they're taking additional step and basically saying, we could also tell you that not only you can't go above the range, but we want you to go zero. I think legally, and as far as policy and legislation, I don't think that they really have, I look
they-
at my,
I think they have
Say it
to
again,
set a range.
They wouldn't have the authority.
yeah, to say MTSU or TSU or any other university, you must go to zero. And then if we do go above that, to your question,
Yeah.
You'd have to have a case to fight with the public. I mean,
Well,
you'd have
and
to
I
sell your
understand
case
that.
to the public.
I understand
The
that.
reason that the governor did these boards, and one of them is that our board would own the tuition. And you'd see
Thank
people in the public and
Exactly.
say, hey, why'd you go up? Or why didn't you go up? Or why didn't you get a new building? And so it's our responsibility to sell our tuition to our peers.
Right.
But I think, who knows what'll happen if you run the stop sign? I mean,
Right.
But I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
Certainly not in our case, unless there's emergency, and then you'd have to sell it.
Right. Well, I'm not advocating it, I'm just asking
No,
the
no.
question. I don't understand I don't understand the thought behind setting a limit. I guess that's the general question that's being asked. I don't understand those limits that are being put on institutions by THEC while we're being challenged to manage the institutions, and let's say we say, I think we can justify a bigger increase than if they had said, you have a 2% limit, and we say we need 2.84, do we come back and say, we figured out how to shoehorn ourselves into this shoe that's too small, or do we say, nope, shoe's too small, we've got to buy a bigger shoe?
well, I think the general rationale that I've heard, and again, I had some conversation with Director Mike Kraus about this yesterday, is the whole issue of affordability. And it's, again, you have to put in perspective that zero support for many years from the state, and then we were told by the state to increase tuition in order to deal with that, or the
Right.
significant budget cuts.
Right.
So we did that, and now the university is being penalized as, putting the burden on the students back. And the legislature has gotten involved in this, and even this past session,
Right.
there were a couple of proposed legislation that talked about the legislators putting limits and making decisions for the boards
Right.
on tuition. So it's really a catch-22 situation.
Plus, I'm not so sure we want to get too much ahead of ourselves and on the radar. You kind of put yourself as a target and radar. I think there's no secret here. The university at Knoxville has got themselves on the radar. You kind of need to be careful as getting ourselves too far ahead here out front.
Well, I think so everybody's on the same page. They said you could go up 3%, and we're below
We
that.
are,
And we're in line with,
all the other universities.
as to Pam's point, we're about the same as everybody else, good or bad.
Yep.
Which is important from a political
Absolutely.
standpoint
That's
as
right.
well as a
Yeah.
budgetary standpoint.
We need a motion, what do we need?
Well,
you through?
no, we'll go through all the fees. This just relates to our in-state tuition, maintenance fees, our out-of-state tuition, and our different various rates are on the next page, but I'm not going to go through those. The next piece starts on page 101. It's a summary of the mandatory fees that we are recommending for your approval. It's just a summary. The pages right before this would show you all the detail of each one of those, but page 101 is just a summary of the mandatory fees. First one on there is an athletic fee for the athletic facilities. at 15. That's actually a phase-in of a $30 fee. It will be phased in over the next 2 years. And all of these fees have went through the Student Government Association as well, that's on campus, and been approved by them as well. The next three, parking, health services, rec center, all of those are auxiliary units. If you recall, auxiliary units do not get funded for any salary increases or any of their fixed costs because they have to cover everything on their own. So that is just to cover additional expenses for the upcoming year. International fee, it's been 10 years since that has been implemented, and it was implemented at $10. This supports a lot of our study abroad trips that we do, which have increased significantly over the years. So this increase will allow for more study abroad trips for more students to have the opportunity to go on those trips. So small increase there. So a total of $27 on mandatory fees increase for the current year. Next page is non-mandatory fees. These do not go in the calculation that goes to THEC, so then I'll show you that here in just a minute. We've got three of them relate to our flight training program. Just the cost to use of aircraft, some instruction and simulators, some small increases there for our flight training school. The nursing course fee, if you recall, there was a $20 increase in that last year. We're requesting approval for a $45 credit per credit hour increase on that. From last year, the fee was $35. You approved a $20 increase, which got it to $55. So this year, the remaining $45 per credit hour is being requested. That was not approved last year. On page 103, talk about housing. Dormitories, apartments, it's a 2 to 2.5% increase on those categories. I think it's 2.5% on dorms and a 2% on apartments. And that's based on looking at, once again, fixed costs and salaries and all that are not covered by the state, but also looking at rates close to campus by facilities that are just on the edge of our campus, not pricing ourselves out of the market. So those historically have stayed within the probably 2 to 3% over the last several years. So page 104 just gives you a summary of the mandatory, non-mandatory, and the revenue generated by each one of those. Page 105 just shows that when you combine the maintenance fee, in-state maintenance fee, and the mandatory fees together, it shows that we will be at 2.88%, which is within the 0 to 3% range set by THEC. There's actually two ranges set by THEC. They look at the tuition and our in-state maintenance fees at 0 to 3, but then they also cap it at, you have a range, and this year just happens to be the same 0 to 3% when you add in mandatory fees. So when you add in mandatory, we went from 2.84 to 2.88. So, and that is it on my presentation.
Alan, does THEC even look at non-mandatory fees?
No, those
They
are
don't
left
even
up
look
to
at
the
it?
board. Yes,
Okay,
the local
okay.
boards.
I'll make a motion to approve. Is that the
Second.
next, is that the next thing?
Yes.
Second,
Any more discussion?
sideline question. Occupancy rates on dormitories and apartments. Do we run them numbers?
Yes, we do.
We do.
And our vice president for student affairs is out actually
Do.
dealing with freshmen custom.
Okay.
But the last report I've heard from her, we were way up.
Way-
And,
Okay.
Are we full?
yes.
I mean,
Okay, so
that's-
we're in the 90, we're in
Yes.
that 96
Yes,
to,
absolutely.
okay.
Definitely.
Both dormitories and
Yes.
apartments? Okay.
Yep.
And what is the total capacity? Do you know offhand?
It's under 4,000, if I remember correctly. Joe? Yeah, but.
I was going to say, I need
3,600?
3,000,
Okay.
How many, Joe?
3,600.
So we have a lot of developers are making a heck of a lot of money based on, that's the economic impact that we're part of it. we have in this area.
Okay.
We need a voice vote, Madam.
Yes.
Yes, we do. Is everybody ready this time? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, and motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, could I go back and ask Ellen a question on the maintenance? Or would you?
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Well, we got $8 million, we got a good number for roofs and maintenance. And I'm assuming that'll be done this year.
They will start, of course, we get them funded July 1. Of course, they have to go through design and construction contracts and through SBC approval. The first thing will be those projects will go to the SBC meeting in July. Will be the first step for their kind of stamp of approval, and then they'll go through design phase and go through SBC for additional approvals, and probably start anywhere 6 months to a year down the road. And that's the double-edged sword on capital maintenance projects is used to when we were getting 1 and 2, we could do all those in the summer when the classes are vacant and all that. When you get 5 and 6, they're starting to overlap, and we're having to do those within the academic year, and and having surge space is becoming a problem. But you're going to see those probably start overlapping, and they don't want you running them out 10 years, but you don't have to use them within a year. You just keep using the funds until they're used up. So.
Just short question, is the $8 million that we spent last year, are those projects completed?
No, I don't. Joe,
But
No, so the funding actually appeared that what was approved last year, the funding is available July 1st, a month from now. So they will start design in a month from now.
I'm talking about the $8 million last year.
That's correct. We have $8,170,000 that we approved here. That went through the system. It was approved through legislature, and that was for 18-19. So the money's due July 1st of 2018. And what we approved today was submitting for 2019-20. The money would be July 1st.
Right.
And I assume the major projects are bid.
Yes,
In other words, our 116 people don't build the board.
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
But, and they go through whatever fair market bidding process is?
Yes,
Okay,
definitely. Yes.
I'm sorry, but I just.
Yes, that is all part of the SBC
What
requirements.
would keep us from using our excess cash to start the projects early?
We have excess cash, Joey?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Sure we do.
Yes, we do. So,
Sure we do.
good, excellent question.
Or you could go out and bond $10 million and move it up a year.
Yeah, but when they approve the funding for 1920, I don't know how that would affect when it goes through the SBC approvals of switching that funding and trying to get,
sure
and pay ourselves
Food for
back.
thought, though.
Yeah, I sure hate to wait a year on the things we just did before we even get funding, and then they got to go through that process.
But I'm not sure if we're starting last year's projects July 1, that there would be a benefit of starting those other 7 or
Yeah, they
6
would be.
projects.
We'd work Joe harder.
Yeah, that would be the case. It would,
To make it to our list is a
Right.
priority, period.
so.
I'll ask the general public, is there any place that you all go in the campus that needs to be reported as a maintenance issue? How do y'all do that? How does someone do that? Like if I was to go into Old Main and say, these bathrooms need to be totally renovated.
They call the president or send the president email. That actually happens. Yeah. And that's one reason why I went on the tour.
Chairman of
Okay.
the Finance Committee.
Yeah.
Well, that does happen. We get a lot of feedback in
You're
facilities.
using the wrong podium.
Well, I'm trying not to. They seem to speak
No,
loud
just
enough
kid,
this
just
time.
kidding.
So,
Just speak loud.
so that does happen. Again, from a maintenance standpoint, we have a lot of things. We get work orders that are sent in for the small things. Certainly, when you get into capital projects, those require planning. And I think you've really hit on an important thing. One reason the priority list can change from year to year is because the timing that we're talking about. We're approving projects today that we need that the funding will appear July 1st of
Next year.
2019
Okay.
to be implemented. And so right today, for instance, today, we are working on projects that were approved in 16-17 and 2017-18, those are in full design and full construction. So if you know, we had the list that showed the history. Those projects are in full-blown design and full-blown construction, but you have this year and a half in arrears, and that's why next year when we submit the projects, there may be some things that develop that might change the priority list that we've shown as we look out. So try to be
We just
real
need to
time.
know as a committee when we approve these.
So year before last, when we had, what, 4 million? I don't know, it was less.
No, sir, actually, it was 8.9 million.
Okay.
Mhm.
Is that work completed?
No. Some
It's
of-
in construction. We have a life safety fire alarm system that's in design, moving in
No, that's
construction.
okay, I mean, but at what point, so the year before that,
They're still working on some of those.
so I'm talking about 3 years
Yeah.
ago? Okay.
Right?
Right, and several of those are being completed, and some of those.
Well, you're
are still in
keeping a
construction.
sheet, we don't need a tutorial, but you're going, I'd like to have a sheet based, the money that was allocated 7 years ago, is it
No.
been,
Yes, sir.
or 20 years ago, or when, not really, but whenever? Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I think a
So-
lot of that is based on scheduling as well, you know, of
So
those
with
projects.
inflation, construction cost, all in the upward spiral presently, how far does that put us behind in the project that's not going to be started until year 2020?
Well, that certainly could be a factor. I mean, but
I would certainly think it
when we
is.
do our estimates, we try to build those in, and we
Right.
have some contingencies
Right.
and things like that, certainly to.
So you use
try to address that.
inflation rates?
Yes.
You are? Okay,
So,
all right.
Another observation, and I was going to let it pass, but I want, since we're going back a little bit here.
Sorry.
This new requirement of 40% match, when does that start?
It starts with this submission of 2019-20 capital outlay.
But it doesn't catch the construction, the
The-
concrete, the cement.
It does.
It does, 'cause
Yes.
it'll be-
That's the first project that we will
But
submit.
why, we say we're 5 million short, but wouldn't it be $16 million, 40% of that total project?
No, it's 40% of the match. So the match was 5.2 million, so 40% of the 5.2 million has to come from private.
And why do we call the $5 million a match?
Because that has to come either from student fees, just university funding, or private.
state.
It can be a combination of all that, because we have a
So
facility.
somewhere else, we have to find the 5 million.
Yeah,
Right.
state will not provide
Yes.
that.
And 40% of that's got to be
Okay.
private.
Right.
And all this is new during the last legislation
Yes, the
sessions,
40
last couple?
Right. The match has been there for a long time and has been adjusted, thank goodness, over the last couple of years. But the 40% is the piece that is brand new for this
So it-
submission.
So in my simple mind, and my mind is very simple, it appears the state did a fast one on us. That this maintenance money really is coming from us putting more money in the new capital projects.
Well, it was 2 years ago, the match on a new constructed building was 25%.
Yeah.
So they decreased that to required now is, for us, is 5%. Yeah. So, which is a welcome relief.
Okay.
And you can go up to 15% and get additional points in the grading system.
Okay.
So your project will move up
Okay.
better in that. So we have seen relief over the last few years, because 25%, we were at 25% on the new science building.
Science building, I was going
Yeah.
to mention that, and that was a real
Okay.
It was,
challenge.
Okay.
It is Rob Peter people.
It is.
I mean-
They're taking money from different funds.
Oh, yeah.
And then trying to push us
Yeah, 'cause
to squeeze the fee or raise money or put pressure on Joe to go out
Joe Gann,
and then, Andy, you can't put your name on it. They'll tear it down and throw it away. I do think I'll want to revisit that. I think at a minimum, we should put a plaque up in the atrium that says
absolutely.
that this was the Clement Building,
That's
or
right,
this
this is the
was.
site of Clement Building, sure. Well,
Yeah, we can do that.
I hate to
But-
think we just throw away the history. Clement, I guess, was named after the governor, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure it would
And
have.
Gore was after Al Gore Sr.?
But Abernathy certainly contributed more.
Yeah, sure.
Your point.
So anyway, I just thought about it. I hate,
Food for thoughts.
yeah. And some places do have a wall where they do
Yeah.
recognize these.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Good idea.
That's something we'll
We can
take
look
a
at that.
I
Yeah.
had a little concern about
Yeah.
that. I think that's a good
Yeah.
idea.
Okay. So did we get this done? We're moving on.
I'm gonna ask Heidi if we did.
Why dadgum Steve got us sidetracked, didn't he?
Well, sorry,
No more of that.
no problems.
Okay.
So-
Tab 6.
Okay, so Heidi, are we good
The
with?
the last thing a vote was taken on was tuition fees and housing rates.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was fully approved.
The next
Tab 6, estimated and proposed budgets. This is the last budget for 2017-18, which they call an estimated budget. Then we have the proposed or July budget for 2018-19. So if you recall, we do 3 budgets a year, so this cycle we're doing 2 at one time. Starting on page 111 are the schedules for the estimated 2017-18 budgets. Starting on page 113, and I'm not going to go through each page, but you'll see minor tweaks within each of the categories. You know, the last budget was in October, so doing a budget here in May, we know what spring enrollment was. We know a little bit about, you know, what fall really brought in. We just know a little bit more, so that's why we go through and make the tweaks. But the tweaks are not very much. We're showing about an $86,000 difference from October in revenues. And then the other schedules, since we do a balanced budget, you'll notice on expenses that both of those come out to $86,000, and we make some adjustments in each of the categories. And then we do auxiliaries and restricted as well for those. On page 119, that is our July or proposed 2018-19 budget. We show the estimated budget in these schedules alongside our July budget. So here we have put in a 1.5% tuition increase. We try not to hold, you know, if we were at 2.84, we don't want to wait and put that all in the October budget because it really makes a difference between your July and October budget when it goes down to the state and there's a few more questions. So we try to put in somewhere around half of what we're requesting. So we stuck in 1.5 here. All of the appropriation increases are in here for the salary pool, for the health insurance, formula funding, and then we put in the mandatory fee increases into the appropriate categories throughout. So you'll see about a $10 million increase on the revenue side. Starting on page 122, 123 shows your expense side. If you'll recall, in July, we go back to a base budget. In October and in the estimated budget, we're working off of base budget plus any reserves carryover from the prior year. Since we don't know what that is because we haven't hit June 30, we go back to just a base budget. So that's why you're going to see a decrease in the expense side. But in October, we'll put that back in and it goes back up. It kind of yo-yos from one budget cycle to another. So.
I just want to point out on page 122, if you look at the estimated budget, the July budget, and where we're spending our money, when we say that academics and instruction is our number one priority, that is not rhetoric. You can see where the majority of our budget and our funding goes to, and sometimes that is lost in discussion.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at the first 4 categories, instruction, research, public service, academic support, that's really your academic component right there, and that's about 60% of the funding goes into those 4 categories. Okay. Once again, next page is 124 is your auxiliaries, and 125 are restricted revenues and revenues and expenses. So same part of, as you saw in the estimated budget. Page 126 shows the overall, if you add up the entire university's budget, is going from $430 million to a little bit over $441 million, a $11.2 million increase. Page 127 is a disclosure that we put in here that is required to be submitted to TBR under the Focus Act. And it just says if we're doing any bonding projects, we have to put it on here because as the Focus Act, any bonding still is connected to TBR because the bond finance agreement is still with TBR. So we put parking services was already on there. We put academic classroom building on here for $1.5 million. That's because private funding on that building may not come on the front end. It may come with naming rights, rooms, classrooms, and so forth. So if when the project gets started, they're going to ask us for all the match money. So we have to go out and bond that, and then as the private money comes in, we can use that to pay that bond down. So, and that is it on that section, and I'm open for questions.
Your motion required.
Yes, yes, I was wanting to thank Alan and his team for all the work and everyone that supports the process here at the university to come up with the budgets. The budget here is the direct results of the fees that we talked about previously. So this is just taking those fees and turning them into the annual budget for us. And thank you very much, Alan, and your people for making this happen. I was just thinking about last year, how much time we spent, sometimes in the weeds, trying to get our knowledge base up. And thank you very much for being patient with us during that process. So I would entertain any discussion anybody might have on this budget before I'll ask for the motion. Alan is here and his team, the team's here, so now's your chance.
Alan, is there anything that you have a concern about?
No. You know, we could always use more state funding, you know, but we build our budget. It's in tandem. You know, we look at what we're getting through the funding formula. Our budget process starts, you know, and Kathy Beck will tell you, starts in November every year when THEC issues, you know, their recommendation, you know, based on our formula funding and our numbers and all that, and then we build upon it all year long, you know. So it's not an overnight, you know, we don't look at it and, you know, it's in tandem. You know, if that funding's up, you know, definitely we're going to look at tuition and fees in a different way. If it's down, we have to look at that in a different way. There's two major revenue sources to the university for the most part. You know, there's other sources as well, but the two main ones are your formula, what's coming through the formula,
State appropriate.
and through appropriations, and then the other side is, of course, tuition and fees. So
Yes, we did. And yes, and Trustee Baker, I'd like to add in terms of your question, I do have one concern of the budget, and I articulate this to the campus constantly. Enrollment plays a significant impact on our budget. And I think over the years we've done a great job with the incoming, and you'll hear later in your committee, Trustee Wright, about where we are with enrollment with new students. We're seeing good progress there, and I'm not going to steal your thunder, Dr. Sells, but the concern is our continuing students and the impact that's having on our budget. There's no question that we're doing a better job, but that's an area that we're struggling in, and it has to do a lot with the financial conditions of the students that we have. And so if, you know, we can do a great job at bringing in new students, but if we struggle with the continuing students, that has an impact on the revenue and the dollars that we'd have to manage this budget. So that is an ongoing concern.
Kind of a strategy question, I guess. So I had asked Alan if TEC even looks at non-mandatory fees, and he said no. So is there a reason that we couldn't increase those more since nobody's really policing those or looking at those? And is it a market issue or?
It is,
Okay.
and that's a good question. It's a market issue. And we're concerned, obviously, just the point I made about continuing students. We have a lot of students where $100, $200, $300 make a difference in whether or not they return. And so you have to be careful that you don't price yourself out of the market for our first generation. Now, if you're at Vanderbilt or Swanee, that's not an issue. Or Belmont, quite frankly, the private institutions. But our demographic, we have to be very cautious and concerned about that.
And we've also had the discussion is they're not looking at them now. If we start stacking them up, does it bring it into the picture at a later date, you know?
Isn't it correct, or I want to be corrected, with the formula on how we're funded, we receive more money. We're learning how to work with the formula.
Correct.
Is the point. And this year we received $1 million, how much?
With 2.7 million of the new funding. We dropped a little bit, about 700,000 in the just the reallocation of funding, so a net of 2 million.
But I mean, we got, JB, we had a net of 2 million.
Right.
And my guess is that that'll increase. We're working the system.
Yes.
Last year's net was under 500,000.
100,000. And that's a key point, Mr. Chairman. And again, I want to state this particularly for our faculty members that are here and other staff members, that what happens in the classroom, what happens with our Student Success Initiative make a significant difference, not only for the right reason that students graduate, but also with the new formula and the way the state is now funding institutions, that is having an impact on the bottom line. And I say kudos to our faculty and our staff and those who've been working on our student success. We're seeing that number go up, and our plan is to continue to work in that direction.
I will now entertain a motion for the operating budget for 2018-19.
So moved.
Second.
Once again, any more discussion? Hearing none, everybody's ready? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Now moving on to tab 7, and Alan or Kathy?
I'm going to use
Dr.
another
McKee,
lifeline.
or-
This is my break time, so I'm gonna,
Oh,
Alan and Kathy.
do we need to take a break? We have plenty of time.
Yeah. Sure. We don't, so, yeah, why don't we
Yeah.
take about a 5?
5-minute break.
Yes.
They didn't hear you, Joy.
We're getting started.
All right, let's go.
We'll have the tutorial.
I know, right? Do you want me to move back over there?
Nope, you're good right there.
Okay.
That mic is working, I think.
Yes, unfortunately.
Oh, no. We got to hear everything you were going to say.
I do not like my voice.
Oh, you've got a great voice.
I would sound like Minnie Mouse or something, but yeah, too deep. Well, good morning. Thank you for having a break. And so now you feel refreshed as I discuss compensation. And so we'll get started. I have 2 things to bring before you today. One I will start with is our compensation plan revision. What I have proposed in the materials to you is a change in our salary increases that we give upon reclassification. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's when individuals' job duties have changed, they submit a new job description to us, and we study the position to determine whether it will change in grade grade. So what we're recommending is if a position does come to us and it is up for a reclass, that we do a 6% increase in pay rather than a 3% that we're currently doing. If a job changes by more than one grade, we're recommending a 9% change. Around 10 years ago, we used to do a 6%, and then we went down to 3%. And as the data shows that it has just caused the departments to request exceptions. The 3% is just, when you're looking at low salaries, it just doesn't add up to a whole lot of money. So we're recommending those for your approval. The other thing that we have happen on campus is we have individuals that apply for other positions on campus, and a lot of times based on where we are in the market, the tenure that they have within the university, results in, if they're taking a position that's at a higher level, that HR is not able to recommend a salary increase. So we're asking for permission to look at their experience and recommend a 6% change in pay as well if our range penetration factor would not warrant a salary increase for them. Thirdly, the last change to the compensation plan is an addition for the actual science certification for our faculty members, and adding that into the plan to have an increase of $5,000 per certification that these individuals would receive. So, and I'll open from that, open it up for questions.
Yes, on page 133, I guess, are the three things that Kathy
Yes.
wants us to approve here. So I would, first question, I guess, is to Dr. McPhee and to Alan. This is in the budget?
Yes.
So
Yes, sir.
what we approved earlier would accommodate this structure?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Actual service certification, explain that.
Well, I will have to let faculty add anything additional to it. There are several certifications. One of them is the Associate of the Society of Actuaries, the Fellow of the Society of Actuaries, and Chartered Enterprise Risk Analyst designation credentials. And each one of those are resulting in a $5,000 salary increase when they reach those attainments. And those are for faculty positions only.
Right, okay.
And let me add on that, just this past semester, because of our salary issues with faculty, the director of our actuarial science program, and I'm looking at the provost, we almost lost him to a neighboring institution for, the gap was unbelievable, close to 80,000, is that right? $80,000 to $100,000. And so this is just a small step in that direction to kind of retain and recognize those faculty members who achieve those kinds of certification.
So people that will receive their certification or have that certification? But
When they receive the certification.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think what we have been doing in the past is asking for a salary exception because it was not in the plan itself. It's my understanding.
okay.
Granting the approval to the Human Resource Department to do the 6% raise,
Yes.
what, if we were to become audited or be audited, what kind of documentation would there be for that?
Every position that is analyzed by us comes to us electronically. We have the notes that we make when we're reviewing the job description and then make the recommendation if the position is going to be reclassified, and that goes into the personnel file of the incumbent.
Okay, so the requesting department would send it to your department, and would you be the final approval process of that?
We make the final approval as to what grade the position is assigned to.
But are you the final sign-off?
My Director of Employee Relations and Employment is the person that actually approves the recommendation by my compensation analyst.
Okay.
So can I come back to the certification question? Are those 3 certifications the only ones that are included, or is this, is it open to other certifications?
Currently, the plan only includes those 3.
Okay, so, for example, I'll use myself as an example. My professional institution 2 years ago developed a certification. As a food scientist, I am a certified food scientist. And I have a CFS designation I can use after my title. That's not something that everybody in the organization gets. You have to prove your ability and experience and et cetera. All those, I don't mean to downplay the requirements, but it's just not something that everybody gets because they belong to the institution. I'm aware of other professional organizations. For example, in my department, in the animal science group, there are diplomats of their professional organizations. Would those be, and it's the same kind of criteria, the question that it raises for me is, where do we draw a line, or can we draw a line? We've got lots of professional organizations that are beginning to identify certifications, for example, in real estate. You can be a certified realtor, or you can have certifications for types of real estate that you do. Where, what I'm saying is this is opening the door to a lot of discussion that will take place across the campus about where is that line and how do we define what that category, what those categories may be. Not that I'm disagreeing with it, it's just opening a big can of worms that we need to be aware of.
Yeah. I understand. I think those types of certifications, additional ones that would be considered, would have to come through academics to determine the need. And I'm assuming that this is just the market is demanding that, was why the change was recommended. But I would think that the provost office would entertain other ones.
You're right. And we look at what other institutions are doing, what the practices. It doesn't mean that we will not or cannot consider, but this is market-driven, and also what we are seeing at Peer and other institutions. To your question, though, I would say that we're open to take a look at whether or not we should look at other types of certification. We have to also be careful, too, because of the impact on the budget impact.
That's exactly, that was my follow-on question. This could be a
Yeah.
huge impact to the budget.
So right now, it's market-driven.
Right. Do you have any estimate as to the impact on the budget for those who are covered by that exception? Or that new policy? Let me say it that way.
My question to that initially was how many, and it was going to be minimal impact.
Yeah.
And I think
6 million.
we had one like last year, I think. And so I don't,
It's not really, at this point, we don't see it as being a significant
Right.
impact.
And what would, let me turn it around now. This can become an incentive factor for faculty members to seek out certification to get that extra salary. If this is approved, that incentive factor will become rather large.
Well, let me add that this is not new. We've done it by exception. This is not a new practice. What we're basically doing is putting it in policy and standardizing it. So this is not we've done it, but we've done it on an exception.
And I understand, I appreciate your explaining that. I'm just saying, once it becomes policy, now it's general knowledge. So even though it may have been general knowledge to offer an exception, if it becomes policy now, everybody will know there is no exception. You simply do this and you get that.
Trustee Johnson, I just think we need to deal with this on a case by case. I would be very concerned about just opening it at this particular point, because like you said, it could be any kind of certification. So what I will do is ask the provost to take a look at this, to see how we might want to do this within the constraints of our budget.
Not for the finance committee today, but the bigger question is, are you a better teacher when you have that? Are you worth more?
Right.
I mean, that's the bigger question, because
Right.
state, high school, they say no. They don't pay you more. You're not a better teacher if you have a master. They're not paying more for that anymore. So I'm just, that's the can of worms that it needs to be discussed in Pam's committee, and not on today, but are you a better teacher if you've gotten, like you say, you go out and you spend a week and you've got a certified?
Would you all like to study it some more?
Yes, and I would just say philosophically, I think any organization would want to support its employees that make an effort to improve themselves. We have fought against that, the state policy. It has impacted us in a negative way by reducing and taking away that incentive. And as you made the personal reference, I can make the personal reference of Liz, my wife, who is an incredible teacher. And what I hear from her and others in the system, I'm not sure that was a good direction that the state took. But we'd be happy to take a look at that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, good. And this is not me as a chairman, but just me as a member. You know, I probably would be very comfortable with handling them as exceptions that you've been doing in the past. So keep all options on the table and come back to us. Is that okay?
Yes.
And I would entertain a motion to approve the first two bullets here
Okay,
and table the last bullet for you to do more research.
okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Second motion.
Before we approve, can we have more discussion?
Yes, we will.
But-
I just need a motion.
Yeah.
Need a motion?
It's been said.
Second.
Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Yep.
Now discussion, Tony.
Yeah.
All you want.
It's not on that motion.
Oh, it's not?
My discussion is not on that motion.
Okay, well, let's get it out of the way then. All in favor, let's everybody be ready. All in favor, say aye. 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 Anybody against it? No, okay. Now, Tony.
So I have other questions. Yeah.
Okay.
My question is regarding the peer group. We have a peer group of 50 institutions that I
What
think
page are
are in
you on,
Appendix
Tony?
1. They're on
Yes.
page 140. But the peer group we used back on page 75 is different from this peer group. So, in other words, what I'm saying is we've got different peer groups that are being used in different categories. And my question is, when we have one peer group for tuition and another peer group for salary drives costs and affects our tuition, and we're using two different peer groups to make these estimates. Does everybody understand what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
When we use different peer groups, we're not chasing we're not chasing the same tail. Does that make sense? We're using one set of data to make salary adjustments, and we're using another peer group to estimate our tuition relative to other institutions, so that we're not really getting a clear picture of what our salary picture is doing to our tuition. That makes sense? Everybody follow me?
You would like to have the same peer group.
If we need to have one peer group for everything we do on the campus. Just, I'm using this peer group, and that's what I'm basing
Alan,
my...
why don't you speak to that?
On the tuition and fees, the peer group we use there are ones that were established through TEC many years ago and through when we were under the old formula, of course, and more of this was used then. We use it now just to kind of have it as a comparison to see where, that we're not too far out of the range. We're not necessarily setting our fees and tuition based on this peer group, but we kind of do want to make sure that, we don't tip the scales too far on this group. With the ones used for salaries, when we went to 50 a couple years back, that was to broaden and get more of a diverse, look at salaries and see where we really fall within the 50 or a larger group. And we took some peers out of that group that were, just way too far out of the range and tried to tweak that. But like I said, and we use those peers we are using those peers as part of the market study and the plan and the implementation. But on the ones used or the ones you see on the ones for tuition and fees, that they're more of a gauge in seeing where we stand within, within those 13 or 14, 15 groups. We're not using those and then setting our tuition and fees based on that. It's a little different.
So, to your question, though, connected to that, there's an assumption in your question, and we need to look at that assumption that using the two groups, either positive or negative, impact the bottom line. And we have not speak to that, Alan. I don't think we've seen.
Okay. Say that again now, too.
Yeah, because the question, if you're using a peer group for tuition and fees, but you have clarified that that is just as a guideline.
Right.
And then using a separate peer group, for salaries, that somehow that makes a difference in what the bottom line might be, either one way or the other. Is that the case?
Well, since we're not using the ones on the tuition and fees, really that one is not affecting what we set there unless we see we're going to be, tipping the scales one way or the other on that. So those really don't impact. Now, the 50 that we're using does impact because when we're reassessing and updating our salary market plan from 14-15 to 16-17 numbers and 17-18 numbers, that will have an impact on there. So that set of peers does have a bottom line impact.
So with the broadening, that tips the scale more in favor of particularly the salary issue. Is that correct? Because you're using a much larger group. So there's an advantage in that regard.
And my point is, on the earlier example of peer groups that are presented, we're using a different gauge to look at tuition as opposed to what we're using for salaries. I'm suggesting that we need to use the same gauge for everything. If that's our gauge.
Tuition, you have geographic.
Right.
Yeah.
On salaries, we're assuming that one of our teachers might go way farther, whereas our students are basically within X miles. So the tuition, your point is good, except it's not actually as easy as it looks because our competitor, a junior college or four-year school in California, we don't compete with them. But we do for teachers.
My point is, from a salary point of view, the faculty are capable of moving anywhere they want in the country to take a job.
Right.
But we look at a certain group of 50 universities as our peer institutions for salary purposes. I'm merely saying that we should use the same set of peers for all of our comparisons because the salaries that we pay to everybody on campus drive our tuition rates. And
I'm not sure that, again, you're making some assumptions there. Because that's your major point, is that somehow, because we're using a separate group for salaries.
No.
Separate group
my point is salaries drive tuition.
That's the point I was making.
Yes.
Well, we could cut it down, but I think, I'm just thinking out loud. If we use the same group, the salaries would come down.
I understand. No. Let me try to explain again. I'm not saying that we need to change the rates or anything else. I'm just saying we need to have the same comparison used for tuition comparisons, same peers as for salary comparisons, because we're talking the same institutions. They're charging a rate of tuition to pay the salaries for their faculties. Irrespective of state funding, salaries are a factor. From a faculty point of view, if I'm not looking at how the state funds an institution, I'm looking at what's the salary I will get paid to take a job.
It'd be fun to get you to, or interesting to get you to run that number.
Yeah.
Base it on the same ones and
One of
base it
the,
on the 50.
I think one of the factors you'll run into is the ones we have used on the tuition and fees section. We kind of know what the state funding is. We know around us and stuff. You start going to all 50 of the others, and they're funded at different levels, and the comparison's going to be quite a bit different, when you look at all 50 of those compared to just the ones that are within our region.
Well, I think what Tony's suggesting is shrinking the pool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you use the tuition one, then you shrink the pool from 50 to how many LGIs we got. I mean,
Right.
because they're our competitors. We're not competing with a four-year school in Idaho. For students, we are for teachers.
Exactly.
Right,
And,
right.
and what I'm suggesting is the short list that we use for tuition comparison may only include 50 off the 50, the group of 50. Just take the ones that aren't on the group of 50 out of that list, substitute others that are in the group of 50, and then we have an equal comparison.
You're going to get the result.
But you're not saying both be 50.
No, I'm just saying,
But-
take the non-group of 50 off of the previous list so that we can have as much as possible
much as
apples
a
to apples.
comparison. And we can look at that.
I don't want to cut off debate on this, but it's obvious we got to do more work on it.
Right.
So what I'd do
We can-
is, Alan, Kathy,
Yeah.
y'all get with Tony
General.
and rework the peer groups or comparisons, whatever you think is appropriate for MTSU.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about them at the next committee meeting.
And that'll be a discussion, between provost's office and HR.
Yes, whoever the
and-
team needs to
Right.
be. Is that okay with you, Tony?
Yeah. That's all I'm trying to point out.
Yep. Good.
I have
Okay,
I have one
tab
more. Joey, have one more.
8. Go ahead. You got
One
more?
One more.
You only got one. Now, Steve gets two because he's chairman.
No, I won't do two.
Okay.
As I understand the salary adjustment process, the salary adjustments for those who are under target, under the market target, am I using the right terminology?
We're not there yet.
I understand. The way the policy reads is it's a 3-year process to get a person.
What page
up to-
are you on, so everybody can be on the
I'm
same
going
page?
back to, let me see, page 135, third paragraph, market data is updated every 3 years.
Yep, okay,
Midpoint,
135?
exactly.
Okay. Just
And
make sure
then,
everybody's on the same page,
let's see,
literally.
salary adjustments, I'm seeing, okay. The bottom paragraph on that page, salary adjustments are calculated as a positive difference, et cetera, et cetera. Implementation is typically planned incrementally over a 3-year period to adjust the faculty member's salary by 1/3 of the gap. So in other words, the system is built so that it takes 3 years to adjust a salary to the target.
Correct.
Right.
3 years to
3 years to get
to
get-
fix the gap.
to get there, exactly. And we're also reassessing the market every 3 years. So by the time we get to market, we've reassessed the market and the target's moved.
Right.
So we're,
Well, it's kind of like our capital. We just approved it, but it's not going to be funded until next year.
I got that.
So you're always working behind.
Oh, always, always.
And if money was not a factor,
I'm totally.
and we
I
lived in
understand, I understand.
utopia.
You're always working in arrears.
That's a key.
Just want to point out the fact that just because of the nature of the beast, we
Yes.
can't ever get there.
Right, unless
That's a good point.
it
That's a
rains
significant amount of
money.
dollars.
There you go. Unless,
Yes.
something happens and the state gets
Yes.
tons of money and throws it at us, exactly, we can't get there. So
But
it becomes,
I would say Dr. McPhee and his team are trying to find ways to help inside the salaries.
And I also want to point out that with the previous governor and hopefully with whoever's going to be the governor coming up, that I have personally raised the issue about the need, and I mentioned it to this group before, the governor did for state employees for higher education to So we recognize that, Tony. We understand that. And we are, now that we have some resources, we're making a step in that direction to get us, move us from dead center.
And I think this board has more credibility than it did a year ago.
Right.
So when we go to the Capitol and talk about these
Oh,
issues.
I agree. I just want to make that point.
Yes.
That
Yes.
we are literally chasing our tail. And
Been for a while.
it has been that way ever since I've been here.
Okay.
I would also, we're not the only
That's a good point. That's
point of order here. I
That's
mean,
right.
it has to do with trucking 101, believe
Yes.
me. So it's understood, but it's in constant.
Yeah.
I think we need to take action on the first item, right?
We've already.
Oh, we did that?
those first
Okay.
2 items.
Okay, sorry.
did.
I've just forgotten. Okay. Is there any other discussion? I'll go on to item 2 then.
We're going, nope, you're on tab 8.
Tab 8, yes, yes.
Last time.
Did we?
The next item is our salary pool allocation. As you know, the governor passed a 2.5% salary pool to allocate for salary changes for the university. They only funded 2.6 million of that. In order for us to do a 2.5% pool, it will cost us 4.1 million. What the university is proposing is to put that additional 1.5 million in, but also add an additional 2 million to fund increases. What we're proposing to the board today is to do a effective July 1st, 2018, for those employees that are employed as of June 30th, 2018, for a 1.5% or $500, whichever is greater, for all employees. Part-time employees would get a pro rata. If they're not at the $500 mark, it would be pro rata on their percentage of FTE. Secondly, once we fund the 1.5 or the $500, we're proposing then to take the remaining allocation and which would be $1.7 million to fund market adjustments. And we are still using the 2014-15 data to implement those. But to make some, I think our last meeting we proposed that we need about $12 million to fund salary increases to fund the market totally. So this will at least make a bump there, better than we've done, and we have not done market since 2012, or 2013. So anyway, that's the proposal before the committee today.
We must add, Kathy, that we have added an additional 2 million to that
Yes, sir.
1 point to get us. And this is part of a 3-phase process where this is the first step. And we have developed a plan that each year, and it has to be contingent on resources available, but at least we're making some step in that direction to address the issue that we have heard so clearly from the faculty with regards to the market issue.
Right.
So, and to be clear, the cost of a living allowance, that's not a salary adjustment, that's a one-time adjustment?
No, that is on your current salary, and it would be an annual.
That is a salary
Yes,
change?
yes, salary
I got you.
increase,
I want
yes.
to make that clear. Gotcha.
Yes.
And can we assume that the faculty senate, this is their agreement, kind of a proposal, because I know it's a very important issue
Yeah.
for the faculty overall, and I'd just like to know if they
Yeah.
Let
kind of
me
concur.
Speak to that, Trustee Wright. In fact, in this same room a couple of weeks ago, I met with the faculty senate and had a pretty extensive conversation, got their feedback. I think it would be fair to say that there was really a mixed response. Some wanted to go straight with the across the board, and others felt very strongly that we ought to begin to address market And so, having taken all the consideration and the feedback, it's my recommendation that we make an effort to address market the first step. That's what I've been hearing consistently, the greatest concern that I've heard. And so there was really not a consensus among the faculty senate about this issue.
Okay. It's a tough one. We're not going to reach agreement on it, are we?
No.
Yeah.
More discussion on this very, very important issue. Hearing none, I would,
I have a real quick question.
sure,
This will be my last one, I hope.
that's okay.
Can you discuss how the market adjustments will be made? I understand, is it in accordance with the policy? Sorry, back here. Nope, sorry, previous tab.
There has not been a final decision as to, there will be $3.7 million available to implement market adjustments. There has not been a final decision by the administration as to how that will be allocated. Each individual, the groups of faculty, administrative staff will be calculated based on, what the amount is. But as far as implementation of that, a decision has not been reached as of yet.
And that is an operational issue.
I understand.
We want to
processing.
get the policy approved, and then.
I totally agree. We don't need to be involved in that.
Yeah.
I totally agree with
Okay.
you. I'm just asking what the process is going to be.
Okay.
Still working through that.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this policy on the salary funding pool.
So move.
Second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Oh,
Stan?
oh, I'm done. What time is it? Oh, should have went 13 minutes over. Sydney, if we hadn't taken your break, I'd have been right on time.
Apologies.
Alan, we need to figure in a pee break for Dr. Maffei in the future on the agenda. But let me thank the committee for all your effort, for your diligence to these very, very important issues. And Alan, Dr. McPhee, thank y'all very much. Over a year, we've learned a lot about how the university at this level works and this committee works, and we're very appreciative of that. And I'm sure your life has been simpler, and we've caused you less confusion. Now, we're going to send Tony back to remedial school to get him. No, Tony, we very much appreciate you doing the diligence.
Absolutely.
So I'm done. And who's next?
Academics.